Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining the discussion focusing on the third chapter of the book, Jesus in Our Days. Thank you so much for being here with me. And we're going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about this little book. And as you can see, there's a table of content. We are on chapter 3 out of the 20 chapters. And just to remind you, the psychological series by spiritual author Joanna de Angelis is powerful, it is impactful. During this series of discussion, we will discuss the insightful messages contained in the book for you. Jesus in Our Days is another small book authored by Joanna de Angelis in collaboration with Divaldo Pereira Franco. Together, our goal is to review on a weekly basis each chapter that contains topics ranging from love, tolerance, courage, insecurity, suffering, lack of gratitude. They all give us tidbits, if you will, of information and gives us a different perspective on Jesus. As we dive into his teachings, we are taken by how they continue to touch us and amaze even the most skeptical scholars. So Joanna de Angelis presents us to a Jesus Christ that is uncrucified. And with that, I say, let us welcome him in our lives so we can address different challenging situations with him. Here is my invitation for you to continue to look for answers in Jesus' therapeutical teachings and find health, peace, and happiness. So, throughout the next slides, the next weeks, we'll go over the chapters. As you can see, next week we'll focus on Jesus and love. Very, very good to hear from you there. So, as we start here today, I'm going to spend just a minute or so talking a little bit about this chapter, which presents Jesus as a model of humanity. And his life as a model gives us the sense that he is a man, right? Just like you and me. And as a man, he lived a life that gave us tremendous and timeless lessons that today we draw from his gospel, right? His good news is an invitation to to us, each and every one of us. And this invitation is extended to the entire human race. And the invitation simply one, use me as an example, right? Use me as an example, and all of you are too deified. What does he mean by that? All of us have the spark of the divine inside of us, and that's the beauty of his lessons. So, what's interesting about Jesus that Joanna brings here is that he really did not create any systems or doctrine or formal teachings as we know. He used his own life as the model so that all of us can rethink, reestablish, refine the notion of humanness and take together to a different level than what was seen before. In his time, 2000 years ago, more or less, until today, we we humans are really symbols of violence. Our lives are fraught with arrogance. We are presumptuous. We are bent to dominate others, right? And at the same time, it's just the point counterpoint that I love from Joanna's books and teachings and her information, her reflections, right? The point counterpoint. So as we just bring the what I call the animal nature within us, that survival instinct and instinct to really fight more than anything else with violence and using our ego structure to preserve and dominate. At the same time, we are so vulnerable. We are often battered, we are often bruised, and our fragility is really accentuated by our sense of mortality and our sense of conflicting areas in our mental health and our personality. So let's think about it. After Jesus came, he lived his life, he brought his life as a model, as an example of a different type of human experience. He brings us something that is marvelous. It is a sense that with humility, with simplicity or uncomplicated lives, right? We, the meek, are also we, the strong. And also within that, the notion of a spiritual immortality that frees us from all of our sufferings. So I love that notion, and we're just going to go ahead and continue here uh, talking about this sense of revolution, and it's very interesting because if you think history, human history, right, the great thinkers of all times, they came and they established methodology, frameworks, systems of thought, and while they did that, Jesus, on the other hand, anchored all of his teachings on human ethics, a sense of ethics that is essential for happiness because it is based in love. So I'm going to leave the book, Jesus in Our Days, and I'm going to go straight to another book later on. It's called Plenitude. In chapter 6, Joanna really goes deeper into what is ethics and what is the ethics established by Jesus. So she mentions that what and how ethics is defined is that condition of serenity. And I love that, a condition of peace, of equilibrium. And that condition is one that must respect all the behaviors out there. And it's a condition that will not impose my way of thinking, of being, of respect, right? It is a condition that I cannot impose that, but I also I am ready to confront life, right? To express myself, my being without that being an imposition on others. So beyond the moral ethic that she brings here, she also brings a notion that there's an universal character that really goes beyond the context of a time and a geography or those conventions inherent within, right? It's when we start to frame and become and that sense of ethics is temporal and embedded in it are concepts of convenience or even circumscribed by prejudice, by our own limitations, how our human laws are very myopic, right? It is flawed in itself. So she reminds us that the the notion of this universal ethics is it is one that is atemporal and that survives a certain condition. So, in this way, she says that we can see ethics in the current system of ethics. And we're all guilty if you look at our own histories, right? But the ethics in nations and peoples that will support slavery. Hello, Rome. At the time of Jesus, the Jews were enslaved to Rome, or not so long in Western civilization, right? If you think in terms how Europe specifically, the Portuguese were the ones that did that at a proportion that is unthinkable today, that enslaved the peoples of Africa and sold them in all of the Americans and in some case in other parts of the world. But that was considered at the time as ethical. Or in some cases today we see a system of ethics that will allow for human rights infringements or persecution to subgroups and even other types of code of conduct, right? So that's where she puts here. Let's think in terms of Jesus and his pillar, his thoughts are based on these pillars of human ethics based in love above all. So the type of ethics that she discusses, Joanna de Angelis, when she introduces Jesus as a model, is one that will allow us to discern, easily discern, between right and wrong. And at the same time, the system of ethics will propel us to acquire our consciousness as um, a result of choosing to live life as we can, as we want, right? Back to Jesus in our days. Jesus was a teacher by excellence. We talked about it previously. And another aspect that we bring here is that he did not need to be a scholar, or even in the business world that we live in, a CEO of I don't know, a global company. He did not have to be the top influencer of the day, amassing millions and millions of clicks within a minute. And I'm always reminded of that in an interview that I saw of a well known influencer that she comes in and there's this, it's a woman. She looks into the camera and she does something very interesting. And the interview goes, "Why are you doing this?" And she says, "Well, just by accepting this gift that I'm wearing here, and by coming on my Instagram, the person, the company that gave it to me to try has already received 300 million um, interested parties." And that is so powerful to have those types of influencing capabilities. But he did not have any of that, Jesus. He simply was. And that's amazing. He did not use, as you can read on the screen, sophisms or syllogisms. He never, ever, ever resorted to, oh, yes, eccentric behavior so people can talk about it. And in talking about it, generate, again, attention and power. He did not use even complex formula. He did not ask for your high degree of intelligence or even astuteness. He, 3 years in public life, he simply used references that became so well known, despite the fact that he did not have any of this to support what he was doing. How about that? It is quite impressive to me. It is also quite fantastic if we think about it, what was the tool that he used? Well, his tool was the art of storytelling. For example, he used the little tiny mustard seed, and with it, um, he he taught about faith. He referenced fish and fish nets, and yet he left indelible examples about work that teaches me today, and I've never fished in my life, I have to tell you, right, today about the ethics of work, the teachings that I need to know about my work and how do I present myself with it. He talks about seeds falling in different types of soil, and with that he brought beautifully so the diversity of human sentiments, right? How do we handle faith or the word, the teachings that prophets or messages give to us? So it's important for us to remember his revolutionary quality. Um, let's say one lecture, one sermon, the Sermon of the Mount, he indeed revolutionized the entire humanity as he, with his words, only his words, he reversed what was conventionally accepted as the true north of that civilization. He introduced or confronted the framework of human thought as it was at the time accepted, and they were accepted without any type of reflection or discussion, right? This is it, this is how we live. And he instead invited us all to change and start praising those who are weak, those who are innocent, those perhaps that may be victims instead of what was once prescribed as the object of our praise, right? What were they? Well, the powerful, the arbitrary, the master. Jesus, in that one lecture, the one sermon, he asked us to recognize those of us who are hungry for justice, hungry for love and for truth. And he also invited us to recognize those who are previously considered the object of admiration. And I'm just going to say one, the wealthy, right? As perhaps those are there to squander life resources instead of promoting life. Food for thought, and I love that. Excuse me. So as he comes to this notion of Jesus at one with God, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. We have to consider the fact that Jesus, as a historical figure, he brought that idea that we must be one with God, right? And that God is one with all human beings and all humanity. So from that perspective, the what he brought to us during his again his 3 years of public life was all about humanization. He raised the notion of uh, individuals, you and me, right, as having the freedom, of course we have, but the freedom and the need to be just instinctively reacting to everything that comes to our lives and fighting and surviving as the sole reason for living, to a different time of a different type, if you will, of goal for living, which is the desire to become the pure spirit as he was. So Jesus, as a man, he was that one with God. And interesting enough, he never referred to God as what was known at the time, this fearsome, this distant, this unknown something out there. Instead, he brought God is love, God is the Father, God is the source of love and knowledge, close to each one of us, our needs, and with this incredible sense of compassion and mercy and kindness. Isn't that very different than what we believed until then of God as the source of fear and punishment? But if I pause for a few minutes to ask, where today, you and me, where can we feel the presence of God in our lives? Right? And we would have to perhaps first acknowledge that regardless of our own religious upbringing, it is hard for us to find God, to feel God in every heartbeat. It's just a simple statement from Joanna. And Joanna, explains that when we are completely in sync with the majesty of God's creation, that's when we can see, we can feel, we can hear, and we can be totally aware of the presence of God, our Father. And as we know, it's very interesting. I was just talking about this concept yesterday that God is everywhere, is everything. God is also in the laws that govern the universe. And if you think about it, more than 200 billion stars in one galaxy, the Milky Way, and more than 100 million galaxies as we know it today, all moving in this infinite sense of time and space continuum and with a sense of balance and equilibrium. So if you think now, quasars, black holes, parallel universes, all are concepts that really challenge our human comprehension, and yet they were all built in this intelligent design that is superior in nature. And yes, we are immersed in all of this, which has this immeasurable sense of grandiosity. And what do? We just accept. We accept and we don't analyze. When we do, we become puzzled. How does this all work? If and when our minds start to explore just the vastness, it's just an example, but the vastness of the universe and its laws, we are then naturally drawn to identify the presence of God. From, if you think about it, from the extraordinary mechanisms of survival in the animal and vegetable kingdoms, right? The abilities that we see that we are all focused in surviving and growing, all the processes, all the ecosystem that is built and it preserves lives. We are also become aware of the immense feelings of compassion when we acknowledge this larger ecosystem, these feelings that we have for ourselves And that comes naturally as we then begin to be able to love one another. We're able to extend that love and acceptance and tolerance and welcome to the stranger, to the enemy, those who do not speak, look, or behave like me. So, back to Jesus, he reformulated the entire mosaic concepts, and he comes and he really renders those as more attainable, and because of it Jesus was able to draw people closer to God. And we have to remember, right? God is always closer to each one of us. It's us that we move away from God, and it's beautiful because it's all done through the notion of love. And it's very interesting because if we start talking about the, as he referred to as the kingdom of heaven, right? Jesus did not paint it with either a notion of beauty. You don't hear him describing with any sense of material things. Instead, he was talking always about in our hearts, our desires, the transcendence of ourselves to be able to attain this kingdom of God. So he just to almost wrap it up, but he denied the world, right? The trappings of the world, the material world. He never cursed it. He never abhorred it. He never despised it. He just said, "We're not of this world." He blessed it by acknowledging this, if you will, this landscape where our that welcomes us in our growth, in our challenge, with our achievements, but also our pain and our suffering. So it's very interesting to see Jesus in the teachings that he brings to us by just being. So Joanna tells us, which is quite beautiful, Jesus is to humanity the light that warms and enlightens. But let's move on so we can wrap it up our discussion today as we come to the notion of religious interpretation. In the second book of the psychological series, it's called The Integral Human Being, Joanna discusses the goal of religion. And she brings to us the fact that the goal of religious and religious interpretation is to provide moral comfort and the preservation of the spiritual values of all mankind. Religion, as it brings to us this bridge to religare, that's the word comes from in Latin. Forgive my inept accent because I don't know Latin, but it's in my mind's eyes, right? It's religare, to reconnect with God, to demystify death. It, religion, opens the door to our perception to the mysteries of life. It highlights how our own sense of aspirations and values continue beyond the current material dimension to that of the spiritual plane. In another book, it's called Personal Triumph, I believe, Joanna also cautions us. So, again, point counterpoint. She cautions us to the fact that, yes, many of us in the entire history of mankind use or may use religion as escape mechanism, as a way to not look at the things that we have to look at, not to uh, cope with our conflicts and our challenges that we're going through. So, as we mentioned previously, we all of us look at challenges and conflicts, and Spiritism and Joanna de Angelis both reinforce that. Those are, simply put, opportunities for us, every single one of them, opportunities for us to confront and to overcome and to use those challenging moments as tools for growth, spiritually speaking. So when religion can be used to free us from fear, from anxiety, when religion can provide courage for self discovery and self confrontation, it indeed becomes what it's supposed to be, which is that therapeutical tool to enable us to be healthy mentally, physically, spiritually. But in the book, as she closes this chapter, Joanna asks us if we, as you can see in the screen, if we become fossilized, and I say fossilized, quote unquote, right, by philosophies or bodies of work or even, doctrines that are orthodox in its nature, we really need to be aware that they may be leading us to a place that is not a good one. And so Joanna proposes that if that is the case, right, again, if you are in a context, a religious context that it's fossilized, it's obsolete, it's imprisoning your way of love and being authentic to yourself. She says, start afresh, start anew. She does invite us to just seek Jesus outside of the church and find him in the masses, in the crowd of people out there, or find him in the silence of our own reflection, our own meditation, or even rereading, rediscovering all his teachings so that we can find our true interpretations of what he brought to us. So I finalize our talk today by saying that Joanna asks us to also reflect upon a flip side, right? Not just how those representing the church and the doctrine or the texts in the books, etc., all this system of thoughts, if they are too crystallized to allow for the existence of the purpose of what religion is, to give us freedom through love. The other side of it, the flip side, as I can see here, is what about those people that call themselves Christian, right? Are we disappointed with them? If you expect a certain behavior of those who call themselves religious, what do you do with that? If they don't really mimic the teachings or the examples given to us by Jesus. She just said, forget them. We need to be the ones who can follow Jesus' teachings. We need to be the one following and accepting the beautiful and yet so simple invitations. They're all contained in his messages. And he sent to us, yes, 2,000 years ago, a little bit more, but those messages are given to us to date. We're receiving that. So if we have not been touched, she finishes, she wraps it up with this. If we have not been touched yet by Jesus' teaching, by his life, by his beautiful sense of humanity, it's okay. She just simply says, do not close yourself. Just be open. Be open so that one day, perhaps, his teachings will enter your heart, it will enter your mind, and you will be ready to let him in wholeheartedly. We are in condition today that we really need Jesus in our lives. And it's one that He is our healer, He is our guide, He is our model because He came in the same humanity, the same human conditions, and expressed humanity in His lifetime here on earth. So, with that, I say thank you. Thank you for being with me. Thank you, and I will meet you next week, next Sunday, for the next chapter, chapter 4 of this amazing book. Thank you so very much, and have a wonderful day.